A few technical issues with Skype, but hopefully the Wi-Fi will hold up. Skype won't crash, and Kirsten will join us from London. She'll be the third speaker, Kirsten Hancock from Blue Maestro. And she developed her company, developed, amongst other things, a connected, they call them pacifiers in the States, we call them dummies, and it does things like monitor the temperature, blood oxygen level, movement of the baby, so that can be streamed directly to the parents or the carer's smartphone. So it's a pretty cool bit of technology. It created a big stir at CES, which is the big consumer electronics show in Vegas the year before last. Lots and lots of publicity. So it's a really great sort of UK success story. So our other two speakers are, as you can see, Gary Martin. As you can't see, Gary Martin. Now this might be an issue because this is a state-of-the-art map book with a not so state-of-the-art VGA connector or HDMI connector.
Random switch is in the room. Good to see you.
What's the?
Gonna come regulars.
That's the live stream, right?
Take your seats. So,
this is so
we
weird.
have three speakers this evening.
Get rid of that. So that's the live stream, and as you can tell, there's a slight delay on the live stream that apparently I was playing on my desktop. That was quite surreal. Okay, so we're going to get Gary's deck. Oh no, that's Morna's deck. Yeah. There we go. Let's get that. Now, as I just mentioned, Morna Simpson? Is that correct?
Don't look so surprised.
Are you at the right venue? Are you the right speaker for our next spot? Perfect. Phew. And you're from?
Nanolit.
Nanolit. But there's another company associated with that, right? Something that there's something Nanodot or blog, there's kind of another.
Oh, Quantum Dot.
Quantum Dot, yeah.
Yeah. It's not a separate company, that's just their blogging site and also our Twitter account.
Gotcha. Okay, good.
Yeah.
We'll mention that so that everyone can follow you.
For 4 years.
You've been in stealth for 4 years?
4 years.
Oh my goodness. Wow, it's better be good then. So, what I like to do is a bit of speed networking normally. Anyone raise your hand who's done speed networking in a previous event? But don't worry, I'm not going to subject you to that today because we have a little kind of mini debate. We're short for time. We're going to talk about, like a Vox Pops kind of thing, about specifically the EU referendum and specifically what we think in terms of an impact it's going to have on the UK tech community. So for those willing to take a poll, who's in favour of remaining? Oh my goodness. Is there anyone filming that? That is overwhelming. I don't think there's a single hand in the room that
National polling showed Edinburgh is the most pro-Remain city.
Actually, I was waiting for a bus outside Waverley yesterday, and there were some out supporters, and they were getting a really hard time. And I actually heard the guys saying, if we win this, it's going to be an absolute miracle. We've got to come away with this just not looking like we've got completely destroyed. So I think, yeah, that rings true. So there's no point, in terms of who's out. I put my hand up twice. And that is because I'm literally 50-50. I can think of a whole multitude of reasons why we should remain in. And equally, I can think of a whole series of reasons why it's a good idea for UK PLC to be out. So, yeah, I'm completely 50-50. I'm totally split down the middle. But then, that's the story of my life. I tend to be able to see things from both perspectives. So, I don't know if we've got a roving mic because, well, as you can see, who's going to be directly affected by this either way? I mean, has anyone got various individuals working for their company who are going to get booted out if the UK decides to quit? Is this, from an HR perspective, going to affect you?
Yes, it is, yeah. So we've got a number of people over in Amsterdam don't know what's going to happen. You know, if we were to leave the EU, what would happen to them? Certainly, I think some of them would have to come to the UK, but other ones are considering Canada. They might move to Canada anyway. I'm not sure.
So these are Scots who are based in Amsterdam.
Scots, Welsh, and American.
Well, the Americans, I mean, they kind of do their own thing in
Their
terms
own
of
thing, yeah,
yes,
they do.
immigration. Let's not go
Well,
there.
I don't know what effect that will have on the offices over there.
Gotcha. Okay, interesting. So, Random, I feel you have something to contribute to this brief debate.
I have indeed. I have a friend who works as a jeweller in Toll Cross. She's worked there for 25 years. She's a German national. She's lived in Scotland. She's brought her son up in Scotland. She is absolutely shitting bricks. Let's put it like that.
Beep. Are we up to the watershed?
She will watch the result at 5:30 in the morning, and she's panicking because she sees that she's been classed as a second-class citizen in a country that she's adopted for over 20 years, and that this result, whether it goes forward or not, remain or leave, she will not enjoy the freedoms that she's had as someone welcome in Scotland for all that time and making a marvellous contribution to the arts and fairs and festivals in Scotland that she's done over the many years.
And you're happy, are you, with being dictated to by Brussels? Because that's where we're headed. We are headed towards a European superstate, are we not? Anyone? Anyone?
I think we have to look at the data protection regulation and how that's going to be affected.
Good point, Ray. Sorry, the data protection issue is a hot issue in the tech industry. Explain why that is an issue for tech companies and how it compares to the States.
Well, the DPR, when it gets introduced, will means that all cyber security breaches are going to have to be reported within 48 hours, or companies could lose 5% of their gross global turnover.
In terms of financial penalties?
Financial penalties.
I mean, that could take down a company. And that's very draconian, that's incredibly stringent, and that is a directive coming straight from Brussels, whereas the Americans, they take a more relaxed approach towards data. And I think with the Internet of Things, data is becoming a very hot, contentious issue, because more and more of these highly personal devices that we're wearing, where's that data going? Where's it being stored? Who's it being shared with? Who owns that data? From I suppose an OEM, the manufacturer and the app developer perspective, you want to have untethered access to that data to be able to monetize it and so on and so forth, at the expense of the consumer potentially. And there are other companies like Google and so on, they're holding in Facebook a lot of personal information about us. But is the right approach where you legislate it so strictly in the consumer's favor, the data owner's favor, so that companies can no longer monetize, and therefore they're simply not going to develop products they can't exploit? You're shaking your head.
No, that's not what you said. You said that a company who is careless with the security, such that data is spread across the web, will be penalized. That's not the same as monetizing data.
Okay, what I'm saying to you is, if there's a threat that if you do something that leads to a breach of data that's perhaps not within your control, you do everything you can, particularly for a small to medium-sized company, to the point where you're living in constant fear that you're going to get hacked, because if you do, the penalties are so draconian that you're going to get a fine that's going to make you as a business untenable. Would you choose to actually develop that product in the first place? You'd probably go and do something else, wouldn't you?
In that case, perhaps you shouldn't develop that type of product if it's so weak.
Right. So the Internet of Things as an industry is going to be severely hampered by EU regulation, potentially.
I'm going to say. So he said if you do leak data, you get fined unless you report it. So report it.
Yes.
Don't screw it up in the first place, or if you do screw it up, report it.
Exactly.
So what we're talking about is an issue about transparency.
Yes.
So
Yes.
if you reported
Be
it, your
honest with
share
your
price would tank and would have the similar
Be honest with your
effect.
customers.
Yeah. Look at Target. Look at the major American institutions, and obviously TalkTalk and institutions that have had data breaches. American Express recently reported 3 years after they'd had a breach. Now, it wasn't them directly, it was one of their partners, but they had the responsibility to report it. It took them 3 years. That was in America, where they clearly had killer monkeys. Here at TalkTalk, it still took them a week before they reported it out, and this was major consumer data and millions of it.
But TalkTalk security was highlighted 2-3 years beforehand.
Exactly. It's a PR exercise to keep your gob shut and prepare your message. And unfortunately, a lot of companies want to protect their brand more than they do their customers.
Agreed.
Yeah.
I think is anyone monitoring the live feed? Because these are really good points, and I'm hoping that the audio can be picked up. Excellent. So, a very good point well made, Ray. I'm less sympathetic towards large corporates, particularly the likes of American Express. It's more the ecosystem of small to medium companies that I'm concerned about, that like I said, could potentially shut down overnight if their share price gets hit by reporting a breach, or the financial penalty too onerous for them.
If a Russian hacker's got your credit card details, would you like to know? That's what it comes down to.
Ignorance is bliss, isn't it?
Would you be saying the same thing if we were talking about pharmaceuticals? If there's a report of a drug scam, or it's more important the company could be able to keep that information private? Not at all. It's a balance of rights, isn't it?
A balance.
Consumer does have
Absolutely, I agree with that.
As we produce more data, it's going to become a bigger commodity for the hacker, and it's going to become more valuable for the hacker and more valuable for the commodity. So you have to put these regulations in place to protect the individual. And we have ways where we don't have to share our data. We have the choice. And not a lot of people know that.
Who famously said that?
Oh, I don't know.
Wasn't it Michael Caine? Okay, so I'm playing devil's advocate, by the way, and I did say from the outset that I'm 50-50. But there's only one individual in this room who can speak the voice of reason. No, I'm joking. That can speak on behalf of the Leave campaign, and that is you, good sir. Would you like to provide a balanced view on the matter?
Yes, I've got two viewpoints. There's no point being the same as everybody else. I'm not competing with you guys because I've got completely different viewpoints. So you're all competing
Let's hear
with
it.
each other. Well, I want to be out.
I had my hand up.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
You're really? Was it more like that? Okay, all right. Well, let's hear it too. It's important to have a balanced argument, balanced dialogue, right?
Well, no, what I'm saying is that you have to think differently from everybody else.
Okay.
Or you're competing with everybody else. I'm only competing against people here who think the same way as me. But that's not the real reason is, like you, I was on the fence. And I had to look for something that I was absolutely sure I knew about. And that was, we were trying to limit the size of electric kettles. That would achieve absolutely nothing.
Smart kettles, connected type, we get now with Bluetooth and...
It's still going to take longer to boil your kettle. What does that achieve?
So bureaucracy is essentially what you're talking about. This bureaucratic nightmare is going to get worse and worse and worse as random. You've always got an opinion, so let's hear it.
It's a long time ago that we had the regulation that bananas would be sprayed. It's nonsense, it's a market, it didn't happen that way. These are scarce goods that come out. There might be an impetus.
Project Fear.
Might be an impetus to give standardised kettles, but the market will determine in many regards what happens.
Very good. Okay, we're going to move on, because I don't think we're going to have a balanced... would you like to say, is there anyone else who would like to say a few words? Because this is your last chance, literally voting's about to
It's a
end.
bit like when you threaten to leave and then you don't, and then you never get treated the same after that because you're not seen as committed to the collective as everyone else. And the other point is that...
By the Scottish.
And the other point is that I was talking to my neighbour, and my neighbour is 86, still very switched on and smart, and she was alive before we were part of the EU, obviously, and she's seen what happens after, and she's voting Leave. So I guess from somebody who's seen the before and the after.
Oh, the good old days before we were part of the EU. Let me tell you about the good old days.
Curvy bananas, we had curvy bananas.
We used to have curvy bananas and fruit that didn't look exactly the same. Alan.
I'm just going to make a quick point. There's a lot of people, obviously, here in the room in favour of some of this legislation around privacy. It wasn't all that long ago that EC were pushing software patents on the industry, and not very many people were in favour of that. Who is it that's proposing our laws? I would ask.
What?
87% of the UK law is made in Britain, the remaining 30% coming from the EU, approximately 4/5 is stuff we agree with. So we're arguing about 2% of law.
Do you agree with software patents?
Any particular law can be wrong in any given country. I think in general, the right thing comes out in the end. We might make mistakes, but I think the price we pay of occasionally having laws we don't agree with is well worth the benefits.
Lies, damn lies and statistics. So, moving on. Open forum. So, has anyone got an announcement? I know you do, Ray. Anyone else? Looking for co-founders, funding, holding an event? No? What's that?
So I'm holding an event.
Oh, you are?
Yeah.
Okay, we're all ears.
God. So I'm part of Girl Geek Scotland, so we promote women in IT and tech industry, and I'm holding an event in September aimed at promoting women, sorry guys.
Promoting
but
women
you're
in
still
tech,
welcome,
September
but
the...
women in cybersecurity.
Oh, cybersecurity, very
Because
specific.
that's the only 10%
Definitely more women in
of,
cybersecurity.
yeah, only 10%
Definitely favour that.
of
Only
people
10% of
working
the
that
entire...
women, yeah.
Oh my goodness. And that's where?
So, well, we're looking at a few different
To be
venues just now.
confirmed.
But if you follow us at Girl Geeks on
Probably
Twitter,
here in Copenhagen.
yeah,
Could be, maybe.
yeah.
And is there a website?
Yeah, you can. Well, you can follow Girl Geeks on Twitter.
Girl Geeks
at Girl
on
Geeks.
At Girl Geeks,
Yeah.
Geeks on Twitter.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, other search engines available, other venues available. Bing, for example. Okay. I'll Bing you. No, that doesn't work very well, does it? Okay, Ray, do you have some slides you'd like to share?
Just 2 or 3.
Okay, have you got a stick there?
2 minutes.
Okay, I'll try to.
Thank you very much.
I'll try to plug it in. See what happens.
I've got a PC, you've got a Mac, so it probably looks like it's Japanese or something.
Yeah. So a little bit of an impromptu. Yes. Okay, I heard a click. This better be good, right?
Oh, that's nice.
I'm sure it will be. So, devices. Okay. It's a PowerPoint. Good old PowerPoint. Okay, there you go. IOT Scotland. Hashtag IOT Scotland. Okay, make a note of that. I'll hand you over to Ray.
Thank you. I'm not going to get up on the slide. Good evening, everybody. My name is Ray Bugg. I'm the founder of Scott Tech Engagement. Has anybody here been to a Scott Tech event? I know you have. I know you have. A few of you. We organise 8 conferences annually in Scotland, which are aimed at looking at digital transformation, how IT transforms businesses. It's very much at the business end. So we do digital transformation, cybersecurity, mobile. Tuesday this week we delivered Scott Cloud, which is looking at DevOps and cloud and all the variations of cloud and trying to disseminate the fact that it's now an industry-derived term and nobody really knows what it means. September we're going to be doing IoT Scotland, which is behind you. It's our 2nd annual IoT conference. So unlike a meetup where we're here for an hour and a half and it's short, it's snappy, and we have a particular single focus, this is actually looking at how IoT delivers for business. Is there anybody here, can I ask, who actually is presenting an IoT concept to their CIO or to their board, or is trying to actually encourage the use of IoT within their business environment? Is anybody doing that?
Why are you here then?
And what is it you're trying to push forward without obviously crossing over any NDAs that you may have signed?
I'm developing IoT solar water heater controller.
Mm-hmm. And for what time? And you're trying to push that to your board in terms of?
This is not such a huge group or board. I work for a university, so it's pretty.
So a bit of funding.
Boards and things,
yeah. We're trying to work out and we're trying to present to the Scottish business community
And our core audience are CIOs, CEOs, CTOs, IT directors, heads of network, heads of infrastructure, those individuals within businesses across Scotland, whether small, medium or large, as to how they can actually take advantage of the Internet of Things and implement it as part of their ongoing strategy. It's not a project, it's an actual change in the concept and culture within a business. But what we do realise is that a number of CEOs and members of the board don't get it. And because they don't get it, they won't fund it or implement it or support it. There's an ignorance attached to that. So we're going to try and break down those barriers. It's a full day conference. It's free to attend. So there's no charge to walk through the door. We've got speakers from Uber, from Boeing, who are working with AMRC on working out new processes on the production line in the creation of aircraft. We've also got First Group, who've got 100,000 strong fleet, both in the US and in the United Kingdom. They have the yellow buses and Greyhound buses over in the States. They're trying to link all these things up. Obviously talking about the difficulty and scalability in the US because of the disparate networks they have over there. Much easier in the UK because we have a full network. IOT UK will be coming up to give a compliance perspective and a growth perspective and an investment perspective. And Census, who are obviously Scotland's Innovation Centre for Sensor Technology, who are really pushing the funding and the growth of IoT activity in Scotland, will be there as well. You're more than welcome to attend, it's a full day. Just follow the hashtag and you'll get updates. But that's me, thank you.
Very good.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm sure it's going to be an excellent event. Shall we crack on? You ready?
Yay!
Okay, let's just get the your slide deck up. Right. Well, there we go. There's your little clicker. Okay, round of applause for Gary. Like a stand-up comedian or something. Right, over to you. Thank you very much.
This will be a bit lighter. Cool. I'm Gary Martin. I'm a freelance software developer. I think the buzzword is probably technologist at the moment. Digital's frowned upon, so technologist it is. I'm going to talk to you about Lightlog. It's a project that was funded by New Media Scotland and Project Ginsberg from the Scottish Government. It's a project to try to solve or help solve some mental health issues, particularly to do with seasonal affective disorder and winter blues. So it's about tracking light, monitoring light. Is it too quiet? Can it be turned up a bit?
I think this is just for the live stream. If you
Right. Cool.
I think you can turn it up on the thingy.
It's okay, I can do this.
Are you sure?
Why not?
Okay.
Okay, so let's... Okay, so what is Lightlog? It's it continuously records the ambient light that you're exposed to. It's a wearable. It was designed to be low cost, so it's a very low cost bill of materials. It's...
Don't mind me, I'm going to try and turn up the mic a bit.
Okay. It's a tangible device. So tangible is it's a digital device where it's a physical device that you hold that can display information which is related to the digital data that's inside the device. It's physical computing. So it's a small mobile processor, nothing too sophisticated. There we go.
Is that better?
That's much better. Cool. And most importantly for me, it was pitched as an open source and an open hardware project. So all of the source code, the firmware, the bill of materials, the circuit board designs, everything is all up on GitHub and can be downloaded and used under standard open source licenses. Right, it's going to be a bit small here. So very briefly, who is it for? So particularly seasonal affective disorder sufferers. There's about 2 million people in the UK who are affected by seasonal affective disorder, and across Europe, or across Northern Europe, there's about 12 million people who are affected as seasonal affective disorder sufferers. If you're above 30 degrees latitude or below 30 degrees latitude south on the hemisphere, that's where you start to see a prevalence of seasonal affective disorder. So it's only where you get these seasonal changes, winter to summer. We're also aiming at people with certain types of light sensitivity. So there's certain drugs that you take which can make you very sensitive to sunlight. And there's also medical conditions where you have to avoid certain amounts of sunlight. We're also aiming that this can be for people with just general health and well-being goals. Things like the estimating the amount of vitamin D you might be getting from light exposure. People who are interested in life logging or quantified self, and shift workers. If you work shifts, it's very difficult to get the right amount of light unless you are supplementing the light you're getting in some way. So I think for shift workers who are trying to keep on top of their health, the amount of light you get is very important. And also, the project's drifted, this final one, quite a lot. It's to do with light research. So there's not many accessible products that don't cost a lot of money to actually monitor large groups of people and how much light they're exposed to. So currently Lightlog is being used in Eindhoven Technology University. There's over 101 deployed there that are currently being used in various research projects. Oh, and yes, hours of daylight. If you're not sure where we are, yeah, so we're there at the moment. So that is, if I remember correctly, it's 17.5 hours of daylight we currently get. And then in 6 months' time, we will be down to 6 hours, 50 minutes of daylight. So that's a huge swing. Admittedly, there's not that many major cities. So Iceland, Reykjavik, that's going to be a bit worse. But up here in Scotland, that is actually quite a notable amount of difference summer to winter that we get. Okay, so why would you want to log light? So the idea is by tracking light, you can actually allow people to monitor their behavior. So how much light you get obviously depends on, do you go outdoors? Do you work in a dark office? Can you go out for lunch? Can you get up earlier in the morning and read a book in the window? There's lots of little things you can do to try to increase the amount of light you get each day. So the idea is by tracking light, people can actually see, well, I'm not getting enough, or I'm getting too much, or if I eat lunch outdoors, that's enough to get me up to my daily dosage. Something that comes out from a lot of the research is it's tied very much into various sleep disorders. So it's not just a type of mood disorder, it's also the amount of sleep that you get. So by managing the amount of light you get, you can also modulate your sleep pattern. And I'll show you a bit more of that later. And that also can affect for people suffering from things like Alzheimer's or Parkinson's. They have particularly disrupted sleep patterns. So anything you can do to try to improve that is good. As the usual, improving energy levels and alert lists, and that's not kind of a new age saying. That's the studies show that bright light, among other things like massage, exercise, eating nice food, these things all produce a serotonin boost, and serotonin makes you snappier, more awake, more with it. So these things do actually sort of perk you up a bit. Vitamin D, it's the amount of sunlight you get. Vitamin D is produced by your skin. So if you have sunlight exposure on your skin, that's where you produce vitamin D. For seasonal affective disorder, you actually need light entering your eyes. It doesn't matter whether you have it on your skin or not. It's worth noting that vitamin D, you need UV as part of that light to create vitamin D. So you don't want too much of it. And also, that's not the kind of light you want going into your eyes, because UV is bad for your eyes. So there's an interesting little sort of dance that you need to do there. And also, logging light, it's a manageable amount of data. So if you think about it, you're just tracking, in Lightlog's case, it's red, green, blue, and clear data. So you've basically got a stream. Every 10 seconds, it's taking a sample. And then once a minute, it logs the average of those samples. And you have a nice data stream with all of the light color profiles that change over time. It also has, I like to think, a minimal impact on privacy. Because it's such a simple data set, you're not recording photos, you're not logging personal thoughts. you limit a lot of the risks of storing data which could potentially be very personal. There is interesting patterns in there, but I think compared to some of the data you can track, this is fairly benign. Right, we're getting to some images in a minute, it's not all text. How does it help? So again, easy. It's quite easy to record light, and there's very little interaction needed. You just wear the device and it's just constantly logging. The light logs currently will run for about 4 to 5 months on one battery charge, so you just put it on each day. I've currently got it set up so between 1 to 2 weeks you do a download of the data. If you forget, it's a rolling history log, so you would lose a little bit of data, but ideally you just log that data once a week and you get all of your profile. You can do nice visualizations. Hopefully you'll see some of those a little bit later. Then the idea is to use the interface on the device to promote a little bit of goal keeping. So the device tracks how much light you're exposed to, so it can tell you whether you've actually reached your goal. And if I hold it for 3 seconds, it will blink horribly and probably tell you that, okay, so there's 2 flashing there, I think. So if you have a full daily dose, then they will all be flashing, and it's basically each one of those is 20% of your daily goal. So I was writing my notes here, so I didn't make it out today. That's my excuse. So yeah, the other thing that's interesting when you're tracking light, you want minimal light pollution at night. So 8 lux of light is enough to disturb your sleep pattern. So in the evenings, if you can avoid light before you go, 40 minutes or so before you go to bed, that's going to really help. Again, you'll see there's a diagram a little later which will show you that laptops are about 18 lux of light even when they're dim. So a laptop with a dim screen is still bright enough to disrupt your melatonin at night. Okay, let me skip on, he says. So yeah, so this all kind of kicked off about 3 years ago now it is. So it was in space. It was one of these 48-hour hacks with Project Ginsberg and New Media Scotland, and they were looking for people to pitch well-being apps, I think was probably what they expected. And then I came along with a bunch of electronics and some sweets, which were really useful. Cadbury's Roses, if anybody's listening. I needed the wrappers. That was for the 48-hour hack weekend. That's the only way I could sample color. So I basically used the cellophane of the colored wrappers and used them over light-sensitive resistors so that they filtered for the different color. Did some testing in the hack lab. You might even remember that, Al. And then basically just over that 48 hours, I was able to log some data, demonstrate it, recorded stuff. Didn't have much memory, but these are the kind of profiles you get for the red, green, and blue channels. After that, I went away and did some research. So this has been updated since, so there's a few products here which weren't available. There were some nice sort of hacky projects from students and researchers, but nothing really that was out there and available. So there's this product called the Dimister and the Dosimeter, and that's a US light research institute. Very nice devices, very small, very well produced, a little bit difficult to interface with, but unfortunately not available unless you're a medical institution wanting to study your patients. So again, very good systems, but just not available. About 6 months after I started, Sunsprite did an Indiegogo. Well, Good Lux did an Indiegogo. They did really successful. So they have that this middle item. What's really nice about theirs, it's solar powered and Bluetooth, so it's completely wireless, and it logs UV and white light, which is good. And since then, we've also had things like the June, which is just designed for UV monitoring, and also the L'Oreal patch. I think Simon mentioned that once before. It's a color-changing patch currently. They do say there's an RFID tag version, which you don't have to scan with the camera. So currently, you have to point your camera at the device, and it looks at the pattern to see how it's faded in the sunlight. So they're getting there. I think that's coming for Android. That's the next product. And so this is kind of like my workflow. So the first thing I had to do is go and read a lot of papers, and you just end up with lots and lots of research papers. And so I have a process where I basically text mine them. And this is a self-organizing map based on all the research papers that I piled together to just try to get an idea of what's related, what are the big subjects. As I said, so this is quite a high level one, so this is only 250 items. There's one where you can't read any of the text at all, which is like about 1,000 items. And the main thing that comes out of that is the circadian rhythm. If you disrupt the circadian rhythm, you do cause ill health. So it's really bad if you're not on a standard daylight cycle. You can be offset, but as long as you're consistently offset, if you're doing shift work where your patterns constantly change, that's really bad for your health. I mean, it's linked to all kinds of things: cancers, depressions, lots of stuff. There's lots of data for that, so that really is a problem. The other thing which is quite nice is the research shows, so this graph is just showing melatonin from volunteers. The volunteers were given light therapy, so that's about 40 minutes in front of one of these bright lights. What the researchers found is you can actually shift your sleep cycle, your actual physical sleep cycle, you can shift it 3 hours back or 2 hours forward, depending when you give them this light therapy. So if you have jet lag, you can actually use this to try to shift by +2 hours or -3 hours, depending which way you go. So if you have the bright light in the evening, where the melatonin is down at that low peak, at the dip, the valley, a bright peak there will actually pull your sleep back. So it will basically keep you awake for longer. If you have it early in the morning, you'll actually push that forward. So you'll want to sleep earlier in the day, so your bedtime will come forward. So you can actually move your sleep cycle if you get out of sync. This is a quick visual to try to show how much lux, so lux is the amount of light that you receive. You have lumens, which is the amount that's transmitted, lux, which is the amount that's absorbed at a surface. You can see, so direct sunlight is massive. So 32,000 lux to 130,000 lux. That's way more than you would need for a standard dose of light therapy. And if you look, so we have light therapies, that little circle over there. So that's 2,500 to 10,000 lux. If you're only getting 2,500 lux, you need 2 hours of that. If you're getting 10,000 lux or more, then you only need half an hour of that. So ideally, you want to be out in indirect sunlight or indirect sunlight. And as I said, if you get there, you only need about half an hour of that to reach your daily goal. And down here, you can see a dim laptop screen is down at 18 lux, and that's above the threshold for disrupting your melatonin cycle. The sensor's got the device has got 4 sensors on it. We've got a short wave, medium wave, and a long wave, so which just match the red, green, and blue for the human eye. There's a third one, the fourth one, which is unfiltered, which basically covers that whole section, and that's for the white light. Those sensors give us interesting color points. So we have we can take that data, and this is for machine learning. I haven't done much of this yet, but it is in there. You can use the color temperature to work out what kind of lighting environment you are, whether you're under fluorescent lighting or gas emission lighting, LED lighting in front of TV screens. So there's quite a lot of data you can actually pull out just by looking at the color profiles in the data. And a very quick breakdown, it's just a microprocessor. You've got a standard battery in there, you've got an IC squared interface and a small block of memory. 64K is enough to record 1 sample a minute of the 4 colors for a week. Usually I do a 2-minute sample size. And so this was the first wearable version. It's a bit bulky, and it basically uses heat shrink wrapped in it. But I was wearing that for probably about a year while I was working on other bits and pieces as well. That was kind of like my test model I would hack on. That finally evolved into these guys. So this was a build of 6. They're still all handmade, hand-soldered things, and they take, well, the first one took about 4 hours to make one, just to solder one up. I got a bit quicker after that, and the cases were all 3D printed. That was the first batch that went out. Those went up to Aberdeen University. So I worked out you have to speed up. If you're making these things yourself, if you want to be at all efficient, you have to use manufactured PCBs and surface mounted parts. So this was the first build for that, the circuit layout. This was the first batch that went off to Eindhoven University. So you've got the PCB layout there, and this is the first 60 that went out to them. And just the little demo is just testing the lights to make sure the LEDs are all hooked up correctly. It's very easy to put them in upside down, and that causes a lot of fun. The second one, so this is what I would probably call the current state, and so this is a Bluetooth enabled one rather than the wired cable one. So these are smaller round devices. They have a Bluetooth low energy module on them. It's called Bluetooth low energy. It's not. It's a lot lower energy than a Wi-Fi connection, but you still need to do a lot of power management, and that's currently where I keep getting tripped up. I'm hoping to do another push for these, so as we run into the next seasonal affective disorder season, so September, October, I'm hoping to push out a batch of Bluetooth ones. So if anybody is interested in being a tester for Bluetooth one, it will be an iOS app first and an Android one is later. But if you've got an iOS phone that's capable of Bluetooth, then and you're interested, let me know, and I can put you on the list. I'll just quickly skim through this. So there's lots of signals in there. Activity, because it has quite a narrow field of vision, as you move around, you're actually sampling different parts of the scene. So you get interesting frequency on the data, which you can analyze to know whether someone's moving or stationary. You can do things like see whether someone's consuming television or computer content, again, because of the light profile and the way it changes. Outdoor versus indoor is easy because it's just such a huge shift in brightness. And sunrise and sunset. There's various tagging and events you can do based on this data. Obviously also going to bed and getting up in the morning is easy to extract from this. Right, so data, what's it look like? So this is real data from a couple of years back. So each one of these is a day. So you've got a sunrise on the right, sunset on the left. If I zoom into that bottom one, so you have so a nice gentle start to the day, and then just before midday it gets quite bright, but you can see this patch that kind of goes off the scale. That's me being outside in direct sunlight. So you get this massive trigger, and it's measuring how much of that you have, and that's how it gives you your daily goal to make sure whether it can indicate then whether you've had enough or not enough of whatever light amount. If you have a small amount of light, then you get small increments to the goal. If there's a large enough amount of light, 10,000 lux or more, then you only actually need half an hour of that, so it can update your goal in real time. And then this is one that happened last year. So this was the lunar eclipse we had, solar eclipse that we had. The little dip you see, so this is, I've got loads of these on test, and they're sort of in my bedroom window and in the bathroom window and on the office and on the living room. Well, the one was on the fridge for about 6 months. This one happened to be sitting, and I'd completely forgotten about it at the time when we had the solar eclipse, the lunar eclipse, no, the solar eclipse, I got it right. So that little dip that's there is actually the moon covering the sun, because we had a relatively clear day then. And if you look at the, if I can get there. If you look at, if you turn that into real color, so this is the blue that it actually saw, you can see that it sort of desaturates, so you get this kind of gray stripe. So as the moon went across the sun, you actually lost the blueness in the sky at the same time, like a dusk effect. I wasn't quite sure whether it was going to show up, but I thought that was kind of cool. And then the last thing, there's a little movie which just shows a quick build. There is sound, I don't know whether it will play or not, but we'll see. Very quietly. Oh, there we go. It's just a quick run through of the build process. So hackathons do work. So again, I'd just like to thank New Media Scotland and Project Ginsberg, Centre of Design Informatics, the Scottish Government, NHS 24 and Creative Scotland. They were all involved in funding. And it's gone. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gary. That's really interesting. I've been very interested in joining the beta program. Because I do have, as well as a smartwatch here, you can see I've also got a jawbone, so I do monitor my sleep. And it is fascinating. I just kind of get brain fog sometimes, and I'm like, oh my God, I feel absolutely exhausted. And I look at my sleep tracker. Sure enough, I've had no deep sleep, or like 5 minutes of deep sleep. Or if I'm feeling really invigorated and I'm feeling creative, I've had a lot of REM sleep the night before. So I do regularly check to correlate, my mood, my mental state with my sleep rhythms. So adding the light exposure to that would be a new dimension to my quantified self experiment. So I think what we're going to do next, very briefly, is munch on some pizza. And you've got to be fast around here, okay? So grab a slice. We have a few beers. I sent Tim off to get a few more. He kindly agreed. So we're going to have some beer and pizza. But be quick, because we've got our next speaker coming up, Morna. So everyone take a break, and the loos are just, restrooms are just opposite. Have a walk around, have a drink, have a nibble, and we'll be back in a few minutes. The clicker's there. Timothy, sit down. This instant. Good boy. Okay. Emma, all good? Gary? Gary? Okay, let's get cracking. So I'd like to introduce my next speaker, Morna Simpson, from Nanolit Technologies.
Hey.
Round of applause.
Hey, thank you. Can you hear me okay? Is it? Yeah. I have to get very, very close. I have some notes, just because there's some things I want to refer to. Okay, so I'm here from Nanolit Technologies, and that didn't move. All right, okay, it moves now. So Nanolit's focused on turning LED fixtures into intelligent and highly tuned light sources that can emulate light, much like sunlight. Also very energy efficient. And what we're really focusing on is human-centric lighting, so lighting which supports the wellness of human beings. So what I'm going to talk about today, if I can get the clicker to work, is sunlight on demand, a little bit about the background of some of the technologies we're using, and our brand, and well buildings research, how we fit into that. And then I'm moving on to light and how light can actually better support health. And we're moving into something that doesn't just support wellness, but can actually be curative as well. Then lastly, talking about future ecosystems of buildings, because at this stage we look really internally at a single building and how the different utilities work within that. But I think there's an awful lot more that ecosystems can provide as well when we start to look beyond just minimizing the impact to the environment and start looking towards how can we add value to that environment. And then lastly, beyond healing. So when we've actually managed to attain all of our goals, which I think are going to take a little bit of time, we're working towards it, but there's a lot of research that needs to be done. Then what is the future of light and how do we see that working, and where do we see, or what kinds of products do we imagine Nanolit might produce? So first of all, quantum dots. Can I have a show of hands? Do people know about quantum dots? So, okay, like the briefest of introductions, because I'm not a physicist. Quantum dots are basically light-emitting nanoparticles, and they enable us to control at a very kind of high level, very kind of tiny level, the types of color that can be produced, as well as intensity. So when nanoparticles or quantum dots are either illuminated or when they have an electric current going through them, we can control, very carefully control the type of light that they produce. And we can produce something like sunlight. We've already gone through several rounds of testing with things, and we are getting very close to that point now. So, quantum dots, you may have come across them in Samsung televisions. So they're being used quite widely at the moment in display panels. And like I was saying before, we have absolute control over the type of colour, the intensity of colour, and the intensity of light that they produce. And the way that we fit with the Internet of Things is that we're also applying sensors to our lights. Sensors which will be controlled partly by the environment, so responding to daylight in the environment, and maybe some other factors as well. These are still to be defined, but are also able to respond possibly to your personal profile. And these might be things that come down to, you know, how much light you've had during the day, as Gary was talking about. So you're getting your optimum light levels. But they might come down to other things as well, like, for instance, you know, do you suffer from migraines, or the specific types of light that you need in order to relieve you of that problem. And of course, we've got integrated circuitry with all of that, which helps us to control that. And we should be able to control things not just across like a building, but also very much changing, responding to different parts of the environment, or even in a single room. So for instance, this room where there's a lot of light coming in through the windows might be quite dimly lit, whereas the back corner there could possibly be quite brightly lit. So an introduction to well buildings. Well buildings is a body of research which looks at all the different factors that make up an ecosystem of a building. So we have air, water and light, but we also have mind, nutrition, fitness and comfort. And what research is showing at the moment is that different types of light will benefit and enhance different activities. Different types of light can be used within an environment where food is being prepared to disinfect it. But also, you know, we can really personalize the type of light that is around any particular person, and that can be hugely beneficial to them. Of course, it's all controlled. This is the stuff I think you'll know about, which is, you know, the controllers and how well buildings work. But basically, we're looking at, you know, the design of utilities, but also the design of features within a building, and how those might fit in with like large controllers. So, well buildings light research. There's 11 different aspects of well building light research. It's quite a broad area, and it's a really kind of difficult thing to get right. So first of all, you might be looking at daylight modelling when you're looking at the plan of a building or developing a building. And daylight modelling will tell you where sunlight will come within a building, and it will tell you what areas will be left dark as well. Using that information, you might want to be able to control things like glare. So where there's a lot of light coming in through some windows at certain times, you might want to diffuse that, or you might design the windows specifically so that it controls the light and those areas don't get too brightly lit. All of these things are about comfort of the people that are actually using the building, and we're focusing really on working environments to begin with. Other issues that come up are the right to light, workstations, which I'm sure there's not a person in here that isn't familiar with the issues around correctly lit workstations. And then there's the colour, glare, the types of colour that you're using, also the type of design of the lights themselves. We want the lighting design to be very uplifting and beautiful so that people walking into an environment are really happy to be there. And we're also looking, of course, at circadian rhythm, which is a really large part of the research that we're exploring at the moment. Oh yeah, and lastly, that slide, the top corner there, one of my favourite ones, which is looking specifically at surface design. And they've used this beautiful Italian pearlescent ceramic, which just gives the whole area, that whole atrium, a beautiful glow. So there's quite a lot within the lighting design that we need to consider. And when you begin to realise how many different aspects we have to look at, you realise that there's a room for an awful lot of control there. So moving on to light and wellness research. You may or may not be aware that there's already been some lighting experiments within schools and within hospitals. This research, I would say, is very early stage, right? We're working with very small groups of people, maybe 100 pupils at once, maybe only 100 doctors. It's really kind of in small, quite contained environments at the moment. But that's all about helping people to improve concentration, improving the light so that during certain times of day, like your postprandial dip, you know, that point after lunchtime where you begin to feel sleepy, we can enhance the lighting then, and that improves your awareness, your alertness, and it also improves creativity. There's a whole number of things which are coming, it just sounds like I'm making a terrible joke, coming to light around lighting research as well. So I didn't want to go through like a vast range of them, but one of them is that green lighting is a relief for migraines. So you can see immediately that there's a real reason to have very personalised lighting conditions as well. But the real shocker, which is kind of fairly recent research, is that rats under LL light, which totally disrupts their circadian rhythm, live roughly half as long as rats that have daylight or natural daylight that doesn't interfere with their circadian rhythm. So when you think about the impact it has on rats and how similar we are to rats in, you know, our physical makeup, you begin to understand like how dangerous it is actually, the types of lifestyle that we're living at the moment, where we're sitting in front of screens, in front of electrically lit rooms, and really not getting enough sunlight. And it's so much worse for us here in Scotland as well, as Gary was saying, because of where we are in latitude. So I wanted to just give you a bit of a breakdown about circadian rhythm. You'll see here from the diagram, can I turn away, can you hear me? So people usually associate it with sleep and how good their sleep is. But circadian rhythm impacts an awful lot of different systems within our body. The endocrine system, the nervous system, even the muscular system. So if you look at the diagram there, what you'll see is that best coordination happens around 2:30 in the afternoon. So, but also, you know, you get your highest body temperature hitting around dinner time, 6 o'clock, highest blood pressure as well. So it's actually controlling an awful lot more of the system than people are generally aware of. And the impact of that can be quite severe. So moving on to light and morbidity. I don't know if you're aware of multiple sclerosis and its direct, I mean, it's now been, for a long time it's been known that it's correlated with latitude. And the further away from the equator you are, the more likely you are to have multiple sclerosis. It's also known that children who emigrate will take on the profile, the MS profile of the country that they move to. But post-pubescent, they're going to suffer from wherever they're going to have the profile of the country that they were born in and grew up in as children. So the direct association with latitude has obviously been something of a lot, you know, an area of great deal of research recently. And last year there was quite a big paper published that directly linked MS to vitamin D regulation and two particular genes that they think at the moment, if you don't get enough light as a child, that's what triggers the gene and that's what triggers the MS. Of course, it could be a lot bigger than that. Vitamin D is the part that we know about. There are other chemicals that are released in your body with exposure to different types of light. So nitric oxide is released with irradiation from UVA light. It's a little bit controversial because UVA light obviously has its dangers. But having said that, we know it to be relieve problems with the cardiovascular system. So there's a strong link, we believe at the moment, between that and stroke and heart disease. Now, when you put that in the context of Scotland and when you start to read about all the different chemicals that are released and the impact that that has on your body, you begin to realise that there's an awful lot of information there that, you know, light could be responsible for an awful lot more. At the moment, we don't know for certain, but there's an awful lot of those listed diseases or conditions which are also part of what we call the Glasgow effect. So you'll see that obesity, diabetes, MS, anything cardiovascular, cancers, psychological issues and behavioural disorders are all linked and could possibly be caused by lack of good light. So how do we go about researching this? Well, as a company, what we're looking at the moment is historical data. We're obviously not going to get into human testing, but there's a lot of data that's available at the moment, and we're trying to identify whether or not we can get the type of quality of information about light from meteorological data. Then we're going to be looking at particular populations, particularly those that are related to specific diseases and conditions, and seeing if there's any kind of correlation between those. And lastly, what we hope to be doing is also looking at other environmental factors that might also play a part in all of this. So for instance, are our climatic conditions in different parts of Scotland, are they particularly beneficial to the Epstein-Barr virus? So in other words, Epstein-Barr's virus is thought to be responsible in part for MS, but also for things like fibromyalgia. And if that turns out to be the case, then we'll have a lot of information there. Again, this is stuff that once we get that information, we identify exactly the qualities of light that can be not just support wellness, but actually possibly be curative. We can start to develop our lights in line with that. So as a company that started off looking at lighting design and beautiful lights, coming from a design background, that's just one of the things that we kind of like about lighting, We're coming to this conclusion that what we're really wanting to do is emulate daylight as much as possible and get natural looking light. But clearly, when you're looking at daylight across the day and even at different places in the world, we're looking at an awful lot of different qualities. And then we're also having to look at that and think, okay, we can emulate daylight, but can we make it effective to support wellness? And can we go further than that and support health? And then can we personalize that so that everybody's particular working area understands their particular health profile and is lit accordingly. So I wanted to introduce you to a guy called Michael Pollan. Some of you may be familiar with him because he was part of a TED talk called, if I get it right, Using Nature's Genius in Architecture. It's a few years old now, but it's a really interesting talk. He's also the guy behind the Eden Project, if you're familiar with that. Incredible architecture, and very much a leading light in biomimicry. We're taking a lot of our inspiration from biomimicry at the moment. But one thing he talks about in that particular TED talk is this cardboard to caviar project, which I don't know if you've heard about. And this is about, when we're talking about ecosystems and when we're talking about the environment, what we tend to think about is how we can minimize impact to the environment. He wants to go further than that. He wants to actually add value to the environment as well. And he used this idea of the cardboard to caviar project as a way of illustrating that. And in this example, there's a restaurant that produces an awful lot of cardboard boxes. The cardboard boxes are produced in great quantities and they're just thrown out. So they're not being recycled in a meaningful way. So what they did with this project was they took the cardboard, shredded it, made it into horse bedding. And this is part of a complex where people go horse riding as well. So the restaurant, horse riding are linked, also to fishing and other things. So when the horses soiled the bedding, the cardboard is raked up. It's then put into a worm farm where they have worms, and the worms are then fed to fish. And the fish produce caviar, which is sold in the restaurant. So it's a really nice idea of, instead of just minimizing damage to the environment, how we can actually close that loop, but also how we might add value as well. And he went further in the next project, which is the Sahara Forest Project. And in the Sahara Forest Project, he talks about technologies that work in symbiotic relationships. So in that, they're using solar power, enhancing solar power to light greenhouses. The greenhouses are fed seawater, and the seawater waters the plants within the greenhouses. But as residue from all of that, there was an excess water produced. And what they found out in this project was that the excess water caused large amounts of area round about the project to produce its own healthy trees and bushes and scrub and so on. So in some ways they were repopulating areas of the Sahara with bushes. But they were going a little bit further than that because there was other residual products. So for instance, salt was produced, and it can get really kind of caught up in the mechanism for watering the plants in the greenhouses and all that kind of thing. So they took the salt and they made it into building blocks, and the building blocks are then being used